everyone, and welcome to this episode of Soul Seeds, where Melanie is my guest expert for today. And Melanie is a spiritual healer, psychic medium, and a channel. So thank you so much for being here, Melanie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Thank you. And the topic we're going to discuss today is neurodivergence and psychic abilities. So I would love to know what exactly is neurodivergent.
Yeah, neurodivergence is the awareness of having ADHD, having autism, being on the neurodivergent spectrum.
Mhm,
So there is a spectrum of experience and, varying levels of where that can really affect a person and how severe it is and to what degree. And it really just falls in a way where there's no real box for those labels. So
mhm,
I would like to group all of them together. ADHD, autism, ADHD, which is a little bit of a mashup of the both.
mhm,
And what I think people don't really understand about the neurodivergent experience is that all of those terms, they are valid. They are things that are really happening to you, and they are a symptom and a medical diagnostic of what's occurring in your body. So we're
mhm,
talking medical terminology for how something is affecting you, right?
mhm,
So when we talk about psychic abilities and intuition, and we look at psychic abilities compared to ADHD or
mhm,
compared to autism or compared to, ADHD, a lot of those things start to line up.
mhm,
So, sensitivity to energy, sensitivity to social situations and anxiety, being highly sensitive in general, all of that is part of the neurodivergence scale. And I
mhm,
also see that really translating into people who are psychic. So people who are psychic are sensitive to energy. Maybe they have ADHD, they notice a lot of different energies and it pulls their attention in a lot of different directions.
mhm,
You have people who are on the spectrum and maybe they need things to be a certain way and they really get caught in an energy of things needing to be controlled because they're noticing how much energy is moving through their energetic space, and it kind of sends them into this energy of really wanting things to be a certain way to feel like they have control over that.
mhm.
So, there becomes this almost overlap of sorts, and it's just a funny thing that I've really observed with a lot of the students and clients that I've worked with is
Mhm.
that the majority of them tend to be neurodivergent. And, I just so happen to also be neurodivergent. We were just chatting about this
Mhm.
before, where I said, if we have a question and I kind of follow the energy and lose my train of thought,
Mhm.
it's sometimes a part of, that experience of being with and sensitive to energy and watching it move. And then being like, "Oh, well, I followed that tangent and now here we are."
Yeah. So how does your brain work? Does it work differently when you are neurodivergent?
You know, what I have seen and read about neurodivergence that seems to make it different than a neurotypical brain is that there's a lot more activity happening.
Mhm.
So there's a lot more stimulation and activity
Mm.
occurring at once. And
Mhm.
the other thing that a recent study has kind of shown is that people with neurodivergence tend to have a lot more DMT in their brain, which is
Mhm.
very interesting. So, you think DMT, you think psychedelic trips and shamans and those types of things.
Mhm.
And it seems that, people that are neurodivergent, maybe on the spectrum or, in that realm, and people who are psychic, who are accessing the spiritual realms all the time,
Mhm.
there's a pretty, I don't know, there's a pretty clear link for me, but
Mhm. Well, are people who have neurodivergence, are they more open to like being a psychic or a medium, or is that just if you are already more open and aware to that?
I think that people who are neurodivergent are somewhat more open and aware to spirit. I
Mhm.
do kind of see that as a trend, and it tends to be people who, just see the world through a different lens.
Mhm.
People who are neurotypical tend to think very much in the box, and um, you know, they tend to have more of a linear way of, creating a start to a finish and
Hmm.
coming to the thing that they're wanting to do and create. And with neurodivergent people, I really see that that process looks very different for
Hmm.
everybody. And it just looks like there's this interesting crossover between the two spaces.
Hmm. Well, when I know some people who have autism, and they usually tend to be quite distracted easily, or they also have ADHD or ADD, and they tend to drift off a lot. So I recognize that part of it as well. But to me, don't they tend also to be a bit more like easily overwhelmed? And when you are then maybe getting signs from the universe or speaking with spirits, can that not be too overwhelming for someone like that?
Absolutely. And that's really what I'm speaking to here is, when you're sensitive to energy, when you're noticing energy and spirit, let's say a normal person's going through their day, they don't have any dialogue running through their space, they can hear their own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going from A to B. They just have their task.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you have somebody who's neurodivergent who is very likely sensitive to energy and psychic, and they're noticing the energy of everybody around them. They're noticing the energy that's shifting in the street. They're noticing the energy of people who are messaging, sending them text messages. They
Mm-hmm.
have conversations going, maybe music playing in their head at the same time. It's a lot more happening all at
Mm-hmm.
once. And when you don't really necessarily have a way to manage all of that information coming in, it is very overwhelming.
Mm. I can
It's
only
very
imagine, yeah.
overwhelming. It can be, something that gives you anxiety. Um, and, I work with a lot of people who come into into my spaces and they're like, well, I'm an empath. And then they discover, oh, well, I'm also neurodivergent. And then as they kind of practice, they're like, wow, I actually am opening up to a lot of these other things. And I, had these previous diagnoses
Mhm.
as having ADHD or, being autistic. And now I can really see how a lot of those things correlate with the ability to communicate with spirit.
Mm. And how can you protect yourself energetically from that overwhelm?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is really learning how to manage your own energy and how to kind of become aware of your energetic field. Because once you're in that space where you're noticing your own energetic field, you can differentiate between the energy that's affecting you and
Mm.
your own energy. And that's a lot of really what I go into with people is how to set and create that energetic boundary for yourself and how to notice energy that's in your field that's not yours, that, likely you're sensitive to, you're reacting to, and
Mhm.
how to really separate from that energy. So
Mm.
teach them the tools to move energy, maybe communication or attention from other people, or maybe it's demand out
Mhm.
of their space so that they can kind of have their own center and be grounded in their body.
Mm. Yeah, because I'm also an empath, and when I feel other people's emotions, they tend to feel even like my own because they're so strong, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's very important to send that energy back to, I always say, send it back to the owner. And my energy is then just my own. I think that's especially also for empaths like myself very important to do, so that you can protect your own energy and create almost like a bubble around yourself and your energy body, so that you don't get distracted and overwhelmed by everything that is going on around you.
right.
Hmm.
And I think that's such a good point is it's so hard to differentiate
Hmm.
when it's you and when it's not you. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when I work with people that are really sensitive, I'll say, this is how, kind of a rule of thumb, your emotions that you
Hmm.
feel will come through your space. You'll feel them and then they'll leave because
Mm.
your energy.
Right.
If you let them move through you, they will move through you. But if it's a feeling like, you're feeling great and then you leave the house to go to the grocery store and all of a sudden you're anxious,
Mhm.
as soon as you step in, maybe you're hitting another person's anxiety, or maybe you're noticing the energy in the store and you're becoming anxious. So,
Mhm.
about kind of becoming aware of, your own energy to know what is coming in making you feeling bad. And you can go, oh, okay, maybe that anxiety or that anger or that sadness isn't mine. So
Mm.
that you can identify it and be able to move it out. And yeah, I think you're so right with the, energetic field that you're creating for yourself to kind of
Mm.
put that boundary up between you and the world.
Mm. Yeah, and you don't even have to identify that energy that isn't yours. You can just say, okay, let all my energy, all the energy that's not mine, be released from me and sent back to its owner. And that's usually what I do when I feel like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love
Mm.
that.
Well,
Thank you
thank you
for
so much for
listening.
today,
Yeah,
Melanie. Really.
you are so, so welcome. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.